It's not often that a single distro or Linux project is being shilled by this many people. Back when Bazzite first came out and everybody was obsessed with using something that was like SteamOS, or when CachyOS came out and everybody was obsessed with the CachyOS kernel patches. So what the hell is Omarchy Linux then, and why are people talking about it? So, simply put, it is an Arch Linux-based distro created by DHH, the creator of Ruby on Rails. Now, I know a lot of people have a lot of opinions on DHH. I don't care. If you want to argue about it in the comment section, feel free to do so. It is really good for the algorithm. Today, I just want to talk about the project though. So let us start all the way from the installation. Now, like most Arch-based projects out there, we're provided with an installer that is not the Arch manual installation, and is not the installer packaged with Arch Linux. And this is a good thing because both of those methods are not really hyper approachable. This is a very simple installer, so simple in fact, there's really not much to configure. And that makes sense considering the tagline of the project being beautiful, modern, and opinionated Linux. We'll see a lot more of this as we get into the actual desktop itself. Anyway, let's take a look at the installation. Let's select our keyboard. I'm on English US. We can select a username. I'm just going to put in Brodie, the password, my super secure VM password I use for everything. Please don't hack my virtual machine that I'm totally not going to delete as soon as I finish this video. If you use Git, it actually has the setup for Git authentication directly in the installation, which is a nice touch and sort of goes to that opinionated idea where this is something that DHH is using, so he's going to put the thing that he is using in the installation. I'm just going to skip this for now. Press enter. That is going to skip it. Email address also used for Git. And then the host name, if you don't enter anything, it's going to use Omarchy. That is totally fine for me. Then our time zone, it will try to automatically detect it, which is nice. I am in Adelaide, Australia. And that's it. We can select the drive we want to install on. Format the disk. And that's all. There's no other configuration, nothing to worry about. It is a very simple and very straightforward installer. If you can type on a keyboard and you can press enter, you can work it out. Now, this is going to take quite a while to go through everything, so I have another virtual machine where everything is already done. Now, this is going to take quite a while to do everything, so if you're doing this yourself, go grab a coffee, go outside for a bit, I don't know, pet a cat, whatever you feel like doing, come back in 5-10 minutes, and then it should be good to go. Actually, while I wait, I should mention the fact there is another installation option as well. What we can do, if I can get GNOME boxes to actually let me see the top bar here, that's not an Omarchy issue, that's a GNOME boxes being GNOME boxes issue, there is a manual installation method as well. So you can take a regular Arch ISO, go through whatever method you want to go through to install that, and then as a post-install method, then download the Omarchy script. Now, it's doing my not exactly favorite thing of curling into bash. I don't like this as an install method. If you want to use it, it is here. I'm using the ISO method. I trust the ISO method more. But if you just want to use it as a post-install script, or you want to install it on something like a CachyOS, for example, this is an option you can go through instead. Even though I don't like this as an installation method, I do like the fact that it is honest about what the project is. It's not really a distro. It's a RICE for Arch Linux. It's a post-install script, and it's honest about that, right? Like, so many Arch-based projects, or Ubuntu-based projects, or Debian-based projects, or Fedora-based projects sort of act as if they are distros, but 99% of what they do is just relying on upstream. This is just saying, yeah, we know we're upstream. That's okay. That's fine. That's what the project is. Here we have the completed installation. Ignore the numbers onto the side. That is just me pressing things on my keyboard. Obviously, if you're in a virtual machine, make sure you unmount the ISO. If you're installing this on hardware, unplug the USB, and reboot into your new system. And welcome to Omarchy Linux. Make sure you remember the password you just set. It's going to take a little bit to load in the first time just to get everything set up. Okay, it's taking a bit longer to load in the first time than I thought. Every other load after this is much quicker. It's just initial setup, has to do some things post-install. And did I configure my virtual machine wrong? Nope, we're good. Okay, no, we're good. Now, when you first go in, you're going to see this update system when you have internet. Click to update the system. Clicking this, give it a moment, is going to open a terminal, and now we can just go and automatically do an update right from there. It takes you right into the prompt, it starts auto-confirming through everything, and you know what? This is a nice thing to do when you first install a system. And honestly, I kind of wish that more projects did this, where you install it, it reminds you, hey, you should probably update and make sure everything is good. Why don't other people do this? Why don't other projects do this? Another nice touch, when you get a kernel upgrade, it prompts you to do a reboot. Why don't more projects do this? Also, very nice touch, yes, and then it does the reboot. Here we have Omarchy. It is a Hyperland-powered desktop. This means it is running a Wayland. This also means it is using a tiling window manager. And I think right now, Hyperland is probably the most popular option on Wayland for a window manager, and there's a good reason for it. It is really fast, it is really ricey, you can do a lot of stuff to it, you can turn all the ricey stuff off if you want to, but also you have those options there if you really want to have them. And for a lot of people using a tiling window manager, they are looking for something that has those options. Do note that any of the lag you might see as I'm doing things is because I'm running this inside of a virtual machine, so just keep that in mind. Hyperland on hardware runs amazingly. But if this was just Arch with Hyperland installed and a fairly good looking wallpaper, I don't think anyone would really care about this. There are some nice additions to it that I think actually give it value. Up in the top left corner of our waybar, we have a button, the Omarchy menu. Also, if we press Super Alt Space, we can access it. This is basically your main interaction method when trying to do things on Omarchy. This sort of bridges the gap between a window manager and a desktop environment. It's not fully desktop environment, but it sort of moves it more in that direction. Now, before you're worried that, oh, I've got to click on apps and then I can open an app, there are shortcuts to access things you want to access quickly. If we press Super Space, this will take you directly to the application launcher. You're going to notice a lot of things in here. A lot of things which you wouldn't normally expect to be pre-installed on a Linux system. ChatGPT. This is obviously a web app for the website for ChatGPT. Discord. Docker, that's more reasonable. Figma. GitHub. A bunch of Google stuff. Kden Live is nice. The LibreOffice suite, also nice to see. Local Send, also very nice. OBS. Obsidian, Pinter, Signal, Spotify, Typora, WhatsApp, X, YouTube, Zoom. This comes with a lot of pre-installed software and a lot of pre-installed web apps. One may call it bloat, and I totally understand if you feel that way. Again, this is an opinionated Linux distro that DHH made and is very much structured around things that DHH, uses, but obviously it's intended for other people to use as well. It's a more polished experience than, what I have on my system. Now, if you want to get rid of anything, you don't have to keep any of this around. If we go to the remove section, there are different sections for each of the things you might want to remove. So if I want to remove a package, for example, it brings us into this fuzzy finder and we can decide anything I want to remove here. Or we could go into the web app section and select any of the web apps that I don't want to have available. If we press escape at any point, obviously it's going to go and cancel that. There's also the option to do the same thing for TUI applications, themes, fingerprint, so there is fingerprint setup support in this, and FIDO 2. Now you should be starting to see what I mean by this menu sort of bridges the gap between a DE and a window manager. A lot of these things you would normally do from a terminal, but here they're being provided through some sort of graphical interface, a menu-based graphical interface, a very lightweight graphical interface, but a graphical interface nonetheless. And if you're the kind of person who cares, the menu is powered by an application known as Walker. I've not personally used this one, but it's basically a general purpose launcher application written in GTK4 and Rust. It is obviously very customizable. The look we have here is very different from what Omarchy has. It seems great. I personally just do everything with Toffee, which is based on dmenu, and for me, that's fine. Obviously, if you're trying to build something that looks a little bit more polished, maybe my approach is not the best one, and this might make a bit more sense. Yes, so I jumped off for a little bit. I had to do something else, and just so you know, Omarchy actually does have screensavers. I like screensavers. I know why a lot of projects don't have them. It is just a waste of computing. It's a waste of power. You don't need a screensaver. However, I do like the fact that Omarchy has them front and center, has them enabled by default, and just shows you that screensavers are a thing you can do on a modern system. Now, the screensaver is basically an Omarchy ad the entire time it's running. And I don't know how much time was spent making these, but at the same time, hey, it's nice to have them. On that note, if you don't like screensavers, if we go into the menu, go to trigger, you can go toggle, and then click this, it will disable it. Same with the other options available as well. If you don't like there being a top bar, you can disable that as well. Totally up to you. I like there being a top bar, and I like there being a screensaver. If at any point you just want to enable the screensaver, you want to, go away from your system for a moment, if we go to system, here is all those regular system things. You have your lock, screensaver, suspend, relaunch, that is just reloading Hyperland, obviously, and then restarting your entire system, and a full shutdown. What I wanted to talk about after removal is installation. So here is basically a shortcut to installing anything you want on your system. Now, I think some of the categories here are a little bit confusing, and you could probably do it better with some better menuing. So we have installing a general Arch package. If we click that, it takes you to this fuzzy finder, which is nice to see. A lot of things where there needs to be some sort of selection of items is gonna be using a fuzzy finder, which it's totally functional. I like it. It's a nice little touch. We have AUR stuff, so Yay is actually pre-installed, which is very nice. There is a web app section here. If we click on TUI, this is actually gonna it lets you create a shortcut to open a terminal application with a terminal. So rather than just going to the terminal, writing the command, you can open up the application straight away. I do this with a lot of applications on my personal system. I'm just going to exit out of that. But it is nice to have that as just something that is pre-configured there, that's available and easy to set up. You don't need to think about it. You just go right through the menu, and then you're good to go. Same with all of these other things here. Like, I want to install a terminal. So there are terminals that are sort of, I guess, already set up to be used with Omarchy. These are things that have been pre-configured for use with Omarchy. Obviously, it's based on Arch. You can install anything in the Arch repos, but these are things which are sort of intended for use, or like set up already for use with Omarchy that you don't need to think about. They're already configured with this environment. Same with clicking on AI here. If you click on any of these, it'll give you a pre-download to go and, install any of these things you want here. It's nice little touches like this. I do think the gaming one could definitely be expanded, because right now it's Steam, RetroArch, and Minecraft, which is probably the entire collection of things that DHH himself is interested in. It's not a complete selection of options. It's also worth noting with things like the terminal option, if you do select the terminal in here, it is going to be set as the default terminal for Hyperland, which is a nice touch as well. It's just a basic thing where you change your terminal you want to be using, and then it just reconfigures Hyperland to make sure everything's in line and you don't need to remake your shortcuts. Now, one of the reasons I do my own racing, I set up my own things, is I don't like dealing with other people's shortcuts. I know that a lot of people like using these big shortcut collections and then just learning somebody else's system. I don't like that. But if you do want to learn what is going on with Omarchy, with Hyperland, if we go to the Learn section, go to the Keybind section, this is a list of all of the keybinds available. This is something you're definitely going to have to check when you want to basically learn initially. There's a lot of things in here. Again, this is why I'm not a big fan of using other people's things, but this is just the nature of using somebody else's configured system. Learn also has some other things available as well. If we go here, there's a section called Omarchy. It takes a second to load because it has to go and open up in a browser. I'm just going to cancel out of that. And now we have the Omarchy documentation opened up in Chromium. So these are basically shortcuts to documentation pieces that Omarchy thinks is going to be useful for you. So the Hyperland documentation, the Arch Wiki, NeoVim documentation, because NeoVim is the pre-configured editor installed. I'll talk more about that in a moment. And also the Bash documentation. Now, the setup section here, this is basically your general configuration section. So I don't have Wi-Fi or Bluetooth with this. If we go to monitors, this is going to open up the... Okay, I hadn't actually opened up NeoVim yet. This is a good time to talk about NeoVim. NeoVim is using LazyVim. So there's going to be a lot of things installed with that. This kind of goes back to the whole very opinionated, you know, that sort of direction. I don't like LazyVim myself. I like to configure my own things. If you like something easy to have pre-configured, LazyVim is totally fine though. Anyway, back to the point I was gonna say. So, clicking on the monitors option, this is going to take you to your Hyperland config for setting all of the things with your monitors. And this is actually a very nice way of breaking up the Hyperland documentation. Let's get to another one, the keybinds. So, each of these different sections are actually different configuration files. So, rather than having one mass configuration file, it is each of these things you want to configure in their own separate thing. And honestly, if I go back to Hyperland, that might be something I have to go and do myself. This is a really clean way of doing things. Obviously, not everything is going to be a Hyperland configuration file. If we go to something like our DNS settings, generally, configuration in Omarchy prefers to use TUI options. If there's not a bundled TUI option available, there is a custom TUI made for Omarchy, usually using this list setup that you've seen in a couple of other things already, and frankly, it is a totally functional way to configure things. You don't need some crazy complex configuration option. Honestly, it works, and if it works, frankly, it's good enough for me. Now, under the config section here, which is a confusingly named additional option, this is going to let you go to additional things you might want to configure. So your actual Hyperland general config file, which links out to those other config files, you can add your additional ones here. You can overwrite the ones that you want to overwrite, all of that good stuff. And if we go back to that, so again, setup, I don't know why I'm struggling to find it. It's in alphabetical order. You have your Hyper Idle, your Hyper Lock, your Hyper Sunset, your Sway OSD, that is your on-screen display, Walker, again, that is the launcher itself, Waybar, that is your bar, and Xcompose. Basically, all of the general things that are Omarchy, like, core things that you want to configure are going to be available here. As I was saying earlier, if you didn't see it before, do you see it now how this menu is basically the glue that makes it feel more like a desktop environment? It sort of, you know, takes that configuration away from just doing things in random applications and doing things just in a terminal that you go to yourself, and provides you very easy ways to access everything. For a system like this, styling is obviously very important. Of course, you can go and make your own themes, and there's documentation on how to do so, But if you don't feel like doing so, there is a style option right here. If we go to theme, there is a bunch of pre-installed themes. By default, we're on Tokyo Night. You can see it's Tokyo Night because that's the one that is italicized. But there is a bunch of other options as well. There is the incorrect option of using Grovebox. I don't know why you would pick Grovebox. For some reason, people like this. I always like to bully the Grovebox users. Then you have some better options like Cappuccine. I do like Cappuccine. Not my favorite, but I do certainly like it, and a bunch of other options that you may choose to use, whatever you are into. Again, if you want to install something else, that's totally fine. You can make something yourself, you can build off of one of the themes that already exists, and do whatever you want. There are extra themes available that are not pre-installed. If you want to install any of these, you can go into Omarchy and go to, let me just full screen it again, go to install, and then style, and then theme, and then select any of the ones that are available up in the extra theme repo right here. And the same thing can be done if we go again to style for backgrounds and fonts as well. Of course, in that style menu, you can also select font, background, hyperlink. That is going to be for things like your window gaps and things like that. The configuration you actually do in Hyperland. Should this be under the setup section? I think it makes sense under style because the focus here is the style part of Hyperland. And if we click on the screensaver option, we can go and configure what the screensaver text is. So if I don't want it to say Omarchy, I can have it say, I don't know, big PP, whatever it is that you want it to say. It doesn't have to be an Omarchy ad, it's just going to be an Omarchy ad out of the box. Now, being basically just Ricey Arch, most of what you're installing is coming directly from the Arch repos. There is an additional repo, that being the Omarchy repo, but because you're installing things directly from Arch besides this, this should be fine installing alongside any regular Arch distro. So not Manjaro, which has its own repos, but alongside Endeavor, alongside CachyOS, alongside regular Arch, basically anything where it's relying on the core Arch repos, you should be good. And frankly, I think this is a safer way to build anything off of Arch, unless you want to go all out. With that in mind, this shouldn't cause any issues if you're using AUR packages like you would see on something like Manjaro, because most of what you're using is just going to be Arch dependencies anyway. And when I checked the Omarchy repo, basically everything I saw seemed to just be random AUR packages that were being built so the user doesn't have to build them on their own system. So yeah, like it's pretty much just chaotic AUR for specifically things that Omarchy wants to include. I mentioned the documentation earlier, but I really need to give Omarchy credit for this documentation, because a lot of these distros, post-install scripts, whatever you want to call them, that are just based on some random project, maybe they'll have some, you know, basic setup guide, something like that, but they don't really have that much in the way of documentation. On Omarchy, everything is documented. All of the applications that are pre-installed, how to set up everything, how to use Hyperland, how to do themes, how to set up a fingerprint, all of these things, it's all documented right here. And frankly, I think the documentation is laid out quite well. This is not what I would expect from really any of these Ricey distros. This is a new standard that I kind of wish that more projects hit. Of course, if we're talking about Ubuntu and Arch and Fedora and those like core distros that things based on, they have great documentation. But usually the downstreams don't replicate that. Usually the downstreams don't explain the things they've done. So if I'm being entirely honest here, if you like the idea of a very Ricey Arch-based project, and you don't want to configure Arch yourself, you want someone else to do it for you, and you want something incredibly polished, because that's what Omarchy is. This is one of the more polished Ricey experiences I have seen. Again, like with the documentation, This should be a benchmark that others strive for in the level of polish they have with a project like this. Again, of course, the upstreams, they are quite polished, but downstreams usually don't have that same level of work. This is really, really well put together. If you're the kind of person who likes the idea of a ricey project like this, honestly, I kind of find it hard to think of a reason not to recommend Omarchy. If you don't like Wayland, of course, it's Hyperland, so, you know, if you're not using Hyperland, you're kind of not using a big part of what Omarchy is. If you don't like the menu, you're kind of not using a big part of what Omarchy is. But if you like what Omarchy has on display, honestly, it seems like a really good project. Do keep in mind, it is still an Arch-based project, and with Arch-based projects, you're going to have Arch-based problems. There is going to be manual intervention and other things that come along, and I don't know entirely how Omarchy is going to handle those situations, especially when a really big one appears. So just note, it is Arch-based, and I don't generally recommend Arch-based things to new people. Yeah. If you want to install Omarchy on top of other things, there are people who have got it working, and those are in the documentation as well. So, yeah, you can check that out. This is a really good project. Yes, it is ricey Arch. And yes, in many ways, we don't need more ricey Arch projects. But this is kind of doing it better than most of them. Like, what can I say? Now, it's worth checking over the manual for a lot of other random little things I didn't talk about here because there's a lot of random little things that are configured here that are pre-set up that I just didn't touch on because I just don't think they really deserve a massive section unto themselves. If you like AI tools, there's a whole stuff with AI tools there. If you have a trackpad, there's some stuff about how to configure a trackpad. If you have a fingerprint sensor, which I don't have, so I can't really test that, there's all that stuff. And basically everything you need to know is all listed out here. And if it's not, there's the Arch Wiki, because this is basically just Arch. There's the Hyperland Wiki, because this is basically just Hyperland. And, yeah. Do I think this deserves the hype it's getting? Well, it's not technically anything special. It's not providing any crazy new tech. It's not building a different sort of distribution model like Vanilla OS, for example. It's not taking what, you know, the UBlue project is and building this entire, like, tree of different projects that's building out into these different specialties. But I do think this serves as a new polished benchmark that ricey distros should strive to hit. If you're trying to create something for other people to use, Omarchy should be what you're looking at as your goal. Not to copy it, but the level of polish that Omarchy has. It's not for me. I like my own scuffed setup that I build myself, but I can completely see why someone would gravitate towards this. So let me know your thoughts down below. Have you messed around with Omarchy? What do you think of it? Do you think it deserves the hype it's getting? I'd love to know. So if you liked the video, go like the video. If you really liked the video and you want to become one of these amazing people over here, go subscribe as well. Check out the Patreon subscribe to Liberapay linked in the description down below. That's going to be it for me, and I just hit my water bottle. Bye.